The click of the front door lock was the period at the end of a sentence written in skin and whispered promises. I remained on the rug, wrapped in the afghan that smelled of us, of sandalwood and my own laundry detergent, a surreal amalgam. The silence she left behind was different from the one that had driven me to the jazz bar weeks ago. That had been an empty silence, a vacuum. This was a full one, pregnant with echo and sensation, as if the very air molecules still vibrated from her presence. I moved through the next few days in a state of heightened, delicate sensitivity. Every mundane action, brushing my teeth, making coffee, answering a work email, felt performed over a deep, humming bass note of memory. I was living two lives. The visible one of a wife whose husband was returning from a short trip, and the invisible one of a woman who had been utterly remade in her own living room. The secret was no longer a quiet stone but a living, breathing creature curled behind my ribs. Mark returned Sunday afternoon. His arrival a splash of normalcy. His hugs were hearty. His stories of his brother's family were sweetly boring. I welcomed him home, I cooked his favorite meal. And my performance was flawless because it wasn't entirely a performance. My love for him was real, a sturdy, beloved tree in my personal landscape. But now there was a second tree, wild and exotic, growing in the same soil, its roots inevitably tangling beneath the surface. The first test came that night. In our bed, under our duvet, he reached for me. I went to him willingly, craving the familiar comfort of his touch. But as his hands moved over me, a treacherous, comparative mind flickered to life. His touch was broader, more possessive. Elara's had been a precise, mapping pressure. His kisses were hungry and giving. Hers had been a slow, devastating analysis. The guilt was immediate and searing, a hot poker in my stomach. I clung to him more tightly, trying to lose myself in the known rhythm, to outrun the ghost in the room. Afterward, as he drifted into a satisfied sleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the worst kind of betrayer. Not for what I had done, but for the fact that my body and soul now held a blueprint of another, and the comparison had been involuntary. The following week, the ghost materialized. An email appeared in my personal inbox. The sender address was a string of numbers and letters, but the subject line was a single, devastating word. Marble. My heart catapulted into my throat. Clicked it open. There was no greeting, no signature. Just a block of text. The memory of marble is wrong. It's not cold to the touch. Not when it's been in the sun. It holds the heat, deep in its crystalline heart, and releases it slowly, for hours, long after the light is gone. It is the most patient of stones. I am thinking of patient heat. I am thinking of the rug. I am thinking of the way you said my name when the sun was about to rise. I read it 10 times. 20. Each word was a lick of flame. She wasn't just saying she remembered. She was saying she was there, in that memory right now. She was pulling me back into the sensory world we'd created. The guilt that had plagued me after being with Mark melted away, replaced by a fierce, defiant joy. She had found a way through. I waited a day, letting the words settle into my bones. My reply was just as careful. I've been studying negative space. The art of what isn't there. They say it gives form to what is. This house is full of it now. The shape of it is familiar, but the space within it, the space has changed. Has a new geometry. It's waiting. The A was a risk. She had never asked my name. But I knew she knew it. This was an offering, a giving of that final piece. Her reply came 2 days later, this time with an image attachment. It was a photograph, taken from what must have been her high-rise hotel room in Tokyo. The city was a dizzying grid of light and shadow, a chaotic, breathtaking metropolis. But in the foreground on a small desk were 2 simple, deliberate objects. A notebook, open to a page with elegant hand-drawn architectural sketches, and next to it, a single perfect gray river stone. The message was clear. Amidst the chaos of a new city, her work and her life, there was a space held for me. The stone was an anchor. Our correspondence became our lifeline, a secret world built in the interstices of our daily lives. We never wrote of love or futures. We wrote of sensations and memories. She described the feel of washi paper, the scent of yuzu, the sound of rain on Shinjuku's glass towers, and in every description I felt her asking, "Do you see this? Would you feel this with me?" I wrote of the changing light in my backyard, the taste of the first autumn apple, the weight of my husband's head on my shoulder during a movie, and in every word I was confessing, "This is my life. And you are in every particle of it." The tension was no longer about physical absence. It was about this profound, intellectual and emotional intimacy flourishing in the dark. It was more potent than any touch. Mark sensed a change, but he misdiagnosed it. "You seem brighter lately," he said one evening over pasta. His head tilted. "More yourself. That trip I took last month must have really given you the reset you needed." The irony was a knife twist. "Yes," I said, meeting his eyes, the truth and the lie coiling together in my voice. "That trip changed everything." One afternoon, a small, heavy package arrived for me at work. Inside, nestled in black tissue paper, was a sculpture. It was a small, flawless piece of polished marble, about the size of my palm. But it wasn't cold. It was warm to the touch, having sat in the delivery truck. It was carved into an abstract, twisting form that felt both solid and yielding. There was no note. None was needed. It was her. It was us. It was the patient heat she had promised. I kept it in my desk drawer, my touchstone. I would hold it during tedious meetings, feeling its solid warmth, a direct line to a hotel room on the other side of the world. The 3-month mark was a week away. The suspense had morphed from a quiet ache into a deafening roar. Her emails had begun to hint at conclusions, at return flights. The abstract was about to become concrete again. The question now was not if our story would continue, but how. The parallel lines of my life were converging, and I stood at the vertex, holding a piece of warm marble, waiting for the earthquake. The final week before Elara's scheduled return was a study in exquisite, agonizing suspense. It was a countdown measured in the frantic double beat of my heart at the ping of an email notification, in the long, hollow silences between them. Her messages became less frequent, the sentences more truncated. Site review final 2 days. This city is a beautiful machine. I miss the quiet chaos of a human touch. Flight confirmed. Landing Friday, 4:15 p.m. Narita to home. The word home was a grenade. Did it mean her apartment, her city? Or the space we had carved out between us? I didn't dare ask. I simply circled the date on my calendar in invisible ink, a ghost date only I could see, feeling the phantom weight of the marble in my palm. My life with Mark became a performance of such normalcy it felt grotesque. We made plans to go to a friend's barbecue on Saturday. He talked about finally fixing the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. I agreed, I nodded, I smiled, all while a silent screaming countdown clock ticked behind my eyes. The guilt had transmuted into a kind of frantic detachment. I was living on a precipice, and the familiar ground of my marriage felt dangerously slippery, as if it might crumble away at any moment and send me falling into a future I could not map. The day before her arrival, a new email arrived, this one with the subject line negative space. Tomorrow. The space will no longer be empty. It will be defined by presence. Where do we meet it? Public garden. The museum steps. Tell me where, and I will be the form that fills your negative space. This was it. The decision I had been passively awaiting was now an active demand in my inbox. She wasn't asking if. She was asking where. The power, the terrible responsibility was mine. I could stop it. I could name a place, a time, and walk back into the storm. Or I could not reply. I could let the silence be my answer, Let the negative space remain empty. Let the 3 months of correspondence become a beautiful, closed book. I walked through my house, my fingers trailing over the back of the sofa where Mark slept, the kitchen counter where we shared coffee, the rug that held the permanent, invisible impression of our bodies. I thought of the warm marble in my desk, of the way she saw the geometry of my soul. I thought of the light in Mark's eyes when he called me brighter. The conflict was a physical pain, a rending in the center of my chest. I loved my husband, but I was the woman Elara had unearthed, and that woman felt more real, more alive, than the one who had existed before. To deny her now felt like a form of suicide. As dusk fell, I sat at my computer, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. My fingers hovered over the keys. I typed a single sentence, deleted it, typed another. Finally I wrote, "There is a small, private gallery on the waterfront. The harbor view. It is all windows and sea light. Closes to the public at 6. I will be inside at 6:15. The last piece in the west corridor is a sculpture of blown glass, like frozen breath. I will be waiting there, in the negative space beside it." I hit send before I could breathe. The die was cast. Friday dawned with a clear, cruel blue sky. Mark kissed me goodbye, oblivious. "Barbecue tomorrow at Dan's, don't forget," he called cheerfully as he left. I stood in the doorway, watching him go, feeling like I was watching a scene from a previous life. The hours were molasses. I did not go to work. I cleaned things that were already clean. I held the marble until it was as warm as blood. At 5 p.m., I dressed with a solemn, ritualistic care. A simple, charcoal gray wrap dress. No jewelry. I wanted to be a blank canvas, a form waiting for its definition. The Harbor View Gallery was a jewel box of glass perched on the edge of the industrial waterfront. As I approached, the setting sun turned the harbor into a sheet of hammered gold. My heart was a wild, caged thing. I used the key I had requested as a researcher earlier in the week and slipped inside. The silence was profound. The public hum was gone, leaving only the muffled sound of water lapping against the pilings below and the soft, ambient music still playing through hidden speakers. Long shadows stretched across the polished concrete floors. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing, until I reached the west corridor. And there it was, the blown glass sculpture. It was a swirl of clear and milky white, fragile and incredibly strong, like a captured sigh. I took my place beside it as I had promised, my back to the window, the golden light painting my silhouette. I waited. The tension was a wire pulled tighter and tighter with each passing second. Had she changed her mind? Had her flight been delayed? Was this all a beautiful, tragic fantasy? Then I heard it. The quietest click of the gallery's side door opening and closing. A soft, deliberate footfall on the concrete. Not the clatter of a visitor, but the sure, quiet step of someone who belonged. She appeared at the end of the long corridor, backlit by the sun pouring in from the main hall. A silhouette once more, just as she had been in the jazz bar. But this time I knew the curve of her shoulder, the line of her neck, the weight of her gaze. She walked towards me, slowly, her form resolving out of the light. She was wearing a long charcoal wool coat, open over dark clothes. Her face was pale, her eyes pools of dark intensity, fixed unwaveringly on me. She stopped a few feet away. The space between us vibrated. The 3 months of distance, of words on a screen, of memory and longing, collapsed into this single charged foot of air. She didn't smile. Her expression was one of raw, unshielded scrutiny, as if verifying I was real. I saw the fatigue of travel around her eyes, and a deeper, hungrier fatigue beneath it. "You're here," she said. Her voice was the same, yet different, roughened by travel, thick with emotion. "I said I would be." "People say a lot of things," she repeated our old refrain, but her voice broke on the last word. I watched her throat work as she swallowed. I saw the vulnerability she had never shown before, the cost of her patience. It shattered my last reserve. I took the single step that closed the negative space. I did not kiss her. I reached out and took her hand. It was cool from the outside air. I brought it to my lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, then turned it over and pressed my lips to her palm, holding it against my mouth, my eyes closed. It was an act of fealty, of surrender, of homecoming. A shuddering breath escaped her. Her other hand came up to cradle the back of my head, her fingers tangling in my hair. She rested her forehead against mine, and we stood there in the dying golden light, breathing each other's air, the frozen breath of the glass sculpture beside us a silent witness. "The 3 months," she whispered, her lips brushing my skin with the words. "It was a lifetime." "I know. I don't want to be your secret anymore," she said, the words a soft, devastating earthquake. "And I don't want you to be mine." I pulled back just enough to see her eyes. In them, I saw the end of one story and the terrifying, glorious beginning of another. The suspense of waiting was over. Now began the suspense of choosing. The form was about to fill the space, and the shape it would take would change everything. "Then what do we do?" I asked, the question hanging in the quiet gallery, as vast and unanswerable as the darkening harbor beyond the glass. The unspoken question hung between us, vast and echoing in the quiet gallery. It demanded an answer, but for now the only answer our bodies could give was movement. She took my hand, the one still holding hers against my lips, and her grip tightened from a caress to an anchor. Wordlessly, she turned and led me back the way she had come, out the side door into the sharp, salted twilight air. A sleek, dark car idled at the curb, a rental. She opened the passenger door for me, her hand a steady guide at the small of my back. The drive to her apartment was a silent, feverish dream. The city lights streaked by, indistinct blurs of color. The only sound was our breathing, uneven and loud in the confined space. My skin felt 2 sizes too small, every nerve ending exposed and reaching for her. I stared at her profile, the focused line of her jaw, the pulse beating visibly in her throat, and the 3 months of longing coalesced into a single driving need. Her apartment was in a modern building near the bay, all sharp angles and glass. The elevator ride to the top floor was an eternity. We stood on opposite sides of the mirrored cubicle, our eyes locked in the reflection, the air so thick with tension it was hard to breathe. The ding of arrival was a starter's pistol. Her door closed behind us with a solid, final thud. The apartment was stunning. Open plan, minimalist, with a breathtaking wall of windows showcasing the night city. But I saw none of it. The dam broke the moment the lock engaged. It was not like the first time, a slow exploration, or the second, a deliberate claiming. This was a conflagration. 3 months of words, of memory, of hunger stored in our cells, erupted. Her coat fell to the floor. My hands were on her face, in her hair, pulling her to me as her mouth crashed down on mine. This kiss was not gentle. It was devouring. It was a confirmation and a desperation. It tasted of airplane coffee and her, the essential, underlying note of sandalwood breaking through the travel. A low, guttural sound tore from her throat, and she walked me back until my shoulders hit the cool glass of the window. The city sprawled in lights behind me, unseen. There was no patience, no artful unveiling. Clothes were obstacles to be violently, joyfully dismantled. Buttons strained, zippers snarled, fabric tore. It was a mutual, frantic undoing. When there was nothing left between us, the feeling of skin against skin was so profound it was almost painful. A shocking electrical jolt of pure connection after 100 days of starvation. We didn't make it to the bedroom. We fell onto the large, low sofa, a tangle of limbs and frantic hands. There was no finesse, only a raw, driving need to close every inch of distance, to prove to each other that we were real. Her mouth was everywhere, biting at my shoulder, sucking a blazing path down my sternum, and my own was just as frantic, relearning the salt of her skin, the sharp intake of her breath when I found a particularly sensitive spot at her hip. It was fast and hard and breathtakingly intense, a physical storm that left us both gasping and shuddering in its wake, clutching each other as if the other might vanish. But the hunger was not sated. It was merely awakened. After a few minutes of ragged breathing, her lips found mine again, softer now, but no less insistent. She rolled us so she was on top, her dark hair a curtain around our faces. "Again," she whispered, and it was a command and a plea. This time was slower but no less passionate. It was a deep, rolling wave of sensation, each touch aimed not just for pleasure, but for memory, as if she was reinscribing every lesson from the hotel and the rug onto my flesh, reminding my body who its true cartographer was. My cries were muffled against her mouth, my fingers leaving what I knew would be faint, possessive marks on the sleek muscles of her back. We moved to the floor on a pile of discarded cushions, then finally, as deep night settled, to her vast platform bed. The third time was different still. It was languid, exhaustive, a thorough and worshipful exploration that left no part of the other unknown or untouched. It was the quiet after the storm, the deep, resonant chord that follows the crash of cymbals. When the final slow-breaking wave subsided, we were spent in a way that went beyond the physical, drained to the marrow, souls scoured clean. We lay on our sides, facing each other on the rumpled sheets, legs still entwined. The only light came from the city below, painting our skin in shades of blue and silver. For a long time we just breathed, our foreheads touching, the tips of our noses brushing. The frantic energy had burned itself out, leaving a deep, quiet pool of clarity in its wake. Her finger traced the line of my eyebrow, then my cheekbone. "I meant what I said," she began, her voice raspy with exhaustion and emotion. "I can't go back to being a secret. Not after this." "I know," I said, my own voice a thread of sound. "It's not fair. Not to you. Not to him. Not to me." "What does that mean?" she asked, her hand stilling on my face. I took a shuddering breath. "It means I'm living a lie. And it's poisoning everything. The love I have for him feels compartmentalized. And this," I gestured weakly between our naked bodies, "this feels more real to me than my own kitchen. That's not sustainable. What are you saying exactly?" Her voice was careful, neutral, but her eyes were wide and vulnerable in the dim light. "I'm saying I have to tell him," I whispered, the words making it real for the first time. A cold terror shot through me, followed by a strange, liberated lightness. I have to end one life before I can even think about beginning another. It's the only way any of this can be real. The only way I can be real. She was silent for a long moment, her gaze searching mine. "And if you do, if you walk away from that life, what are you walking toward?" I reached out and touched her lips. "I don't know. And that's the most terrifying part. I'm not asking you for a promise, Elara. I'm not even asking you to wait. I have to do this for myself, to see if I can even look at myself in the mirror again." A single tear escaped the corner of her eye and traced a path into her hairline. "That's why I love you," she said, the words so soft I almost didn't hear them. It was the first time either of us had said it. "Because you have the courage to face the geometry, even when it's terrifying, even when the shape is unknown." I kissed her, a soft, salty, tear-streaked kiss. "Will you be here?" I asked, the childlike vulnerability of the question hanging in the air. "When it's done. However it ends. Will you be in this city?" She took my hand and placed it flat over her heart, holding it there. I felt its strong, steady beat against my palm. "This is where I am," she said. "This apartment, this city, this life. It's just coordinates. This is my location. My coordinates are wherever you are. So yes, I will be here." We lay like that until dawn, not making love again, but simply existing in the shared terrifying truth of what came next. The passionate reunion was over. The real work was about to begin.